Bom, pessoal, por favor, vamos frente. É um prazer, primeiro prazer estar aqui para mediar essa última mesa desse congresso que está sendo, acho que, muito interessante, muito rico, muito diverso. Eu sou a Amorim, do GIP, Gestão de Interesse Público, e também colaboradora da plataforma socioambiental do BRICS Policy Center. A gente, vai começar essa última exposição, esse fechamento, que vai olhar um pouco mais para a questão dos BRICS, ou BASIC, no caso das discussões climáticas, e olhando para o futuro do multilateralismo do bloco, meio que fechando esse ciclo que começou ontem, no qual a gente olhou para trás, né, fez um balanço do que foram os BRICS, depois a gente passou para uma discussão mais da área de governança ambiental, então clima e outros, não só a governança do clima, mas outros processos internacionais em curso. Agora, de manhã, a gente olhou mais a fundo, né, na agenda climática, e agora a gente fecha de novo, retomando esse painel sobre, olhando mais para os BRICS como bloco. Bom, Samir. Samir is Vice President of the Observer Research Foundation. He spearheads ORF's outreach and business development activities. He's a frequent commentator on issues of global governance, including climate change and energy policy, global development, architecture, cybersecurity, and internet governance, and of course, India's foreign policy. Apart from his academic publications, Samir features regularly in Indian and international print and broadcast media. He is the Indian chairman for the Civil BRICS Initiative and also chairs Sci-Fi, the India Conference on Cybersecurity and Internet Governance. Samir, it's on you. Thanks for joining us. Sorry. Just a second. We are testing the volume here.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
And how long do you want me to speak?
15 minutes, please, and then we'll open for questions, and then you can go.
Okay, great. So let me make 3 sets of comments. The first, I want to speak about the backdrop, which is going to implicate our collective action on climate governance and climate change as we go ahead. And I think one of the most significant developments that has taken place is not that we met again at Marrakesh on November 7th, but that Mr. Donald Trump was elected as the next US president on November 8th. Now, this has implications for global governance. This is an implication for the way we understand globalization, and this certainly has implications for some of the features of collective action that we have been espousing since pretty much 1992, and certainly which has gained momentum over the last 5 years. The first feature of the election of Donald Trump, which is going to implicate what we do in the climate sphere, is the fact that the oldest and most influential democracy in the world seems to have rejected the internationalist propositions of the Clinton campaign. And I think that is important. Hillary Clinton and her entire messaging that was built around internationalism and globalism was in a sense rejected by at least a sizable number of the US citizens. And clearly, if you can see, the undertone of that particular rejection included a frustration at the notion that some distant governance processes have taken away the rights of communities and people to decide their own futures by placing power and the right to decide on a bunch of people in different countries that were both distant and were both non-democratic. So I think that was the first message. People rejected the globalism as was presented or as has been unfolded over the past 2 years. The second was that they also rejected the liberal consensus on trade, employment, growth and sustainability. particularly these four issues featured in the elections. And the liberal consensus, which is the Clinton and Obama consensus, which is our consensus as we agreed in Paris, which is the general and more broad consensus that we see in most places in most countries, had also been rejected. The Donald Trump manifesto was everything that the liberal consensus did not factor in. And in many ways, if you were to stretch that campaign, Donald Trump campaign, and implicate climate change, and he did mention climate a few times, you could argue that the processes of globalization and the processes of cooperation were both rejected in that particular campaign. Everything around trade, everything around growth, everything around energy was put on the table once again, and I don't think we have seen the end of this. I believe other countries might see similar moments. So I think we are seeing a new moment where the nation state is coming back, and there is a fatigue around collective action. The third and the most important part, I think, which is clearly brought out in this campaign was that Mr. Trump was able to convince a large number of voters that the current arrangement, be it around trade, be it around economics, be it around financial flows, be it around any matter, they were only a select few. That somehow, the way the world was being managed and arranged today, the winners were preordained. They were already pre-selected, and there was little and no room for others to join in. This was his message, and it was apparently a message that many got in, and that's why they voted the way they did. And I think for us, we can be the proverbial five blind men and the elephant in an Indian fable story, or we can open our eyes and realize that in the game of communication, in the world of hypermediation, in the world of instant messaging and instant opinion formation, the appeal of Trump's manifesto was compelling. And he won't be the last one, and he wasn't the first one. My problem is that now you're going to see a successive series of mini Trumps crop up in multiple parts of the world, the next one probably being in France, and we need to think about it. So this is the first one. Now, why is the Trump campaign important for climate governance itself? And I would argue there are three reasons why climate governance as we know it needs to be on guard. The first, the accusation about globalization was that it was distant and cold. And I can argue that that is the same accusation which is also true of the processes that are unfolding under the UNFCCC, and the horrible sight of the civil society being shepherded out of the room to finalize a document certainly undermine the credibility of the process. So when someone says that it is undemocratic, that people are not let in the room, that the elites decide the course of action, this side, when people are blocked from the room, from entering the room because some decision need to be taken, is going to undermine the legitimacy of the climate governance process. That is number one. Number two, the second issue with climate change and global governance and globalization, and the rejection of globalization by certain sections today, is that there is a certain impulse to universalize action, irrespective of capabilities, capacities, and realities. All the global elites, irrespective of where they live, Africa, Asia, Europe, America, they have come to the same conclusion on next steps, and this is laughable. That Sudan and Ghana and India and France and the United States of America have chosen the same set of steps to be taken next. One is a $1,000 per capita economy, the other is a $40,000 per capita economy, and yet both are investing wholesomely in renewables, wholesomely in certain other forms of efficiency projects, and in certain development resources. So I think this itself is the second problem of climate change. That universalization is being rejected. People want local action, local responses that fit local realities. And I think that's the second issue that we need to keep in mind. The third and fourth, and the most important, which in fact what I would call today's insurgent politics field zone. I call Donald Trump an insurgent. I believe there are many other insurgents who are classless. It doesn't matter how rich they are. They are selected because they are attacking establishments. They are attacking institutions. They are attacking the status quo. So in the age of insurgent politics, hypocrisy helps them along. And in Marrakech, particularly, hypocrisy was at full display. It is amazing that years after Copenhagen, we still don't have the $100 billion on the table. It is amazing that we have no consensus on loss damage. It is amazing that we are doing nothing to respond to the devastation that many poor countries are facing today. The elite hypocrisy, the liberal hypocrisy allows populist politics to gain such traction as it has. And I think this is the third element of climate change issues that we now need to start recalibrating. Otherwise, they're going to start losing all the ground they gained at last. And my final point on this particular aspect would be that there is again a certain degree of interventionism that is creeping up. I think this European fascination to create a rule book that would allow them to monitor and measure progress of individual national actions is something that is going to undermine the global cooperation project. I think we need to now take a step back. We need to allow countries space. We need to have a more incentive-driven framework rather than a monitoring and verification framework. We need to focus on capacities and capability building rather than on measuring impact and success. And I think we'll have to give nations far more space and agency than we had accounted for when Paris was signed last year and when the process began many decades ago. This is on climate change. Now, what can the BRICS do? So I have now covered two aspects. One is globalization and why it is climate change and what are the vulnerabilities and grievances that we need to address, and finally what can BRICS do, and I will end with that. Let me put forward 3 or 4 ideas. I think in an age where global trade is yesterday's news, in an age where globalization is stuttering, where financial flows are yet to reach geographies and locations which need them most, it will be small boutique solutions that will do. We need to create niche solutions. I have a sense that a smaller group of countries will be able to do far more together than trying to carry 190 odd in the same direction. And BRICS is one such small grouping with huge capabilities and capacities and resources. And I think, therefore, a group like BRICS has great potential to create solutions for a large chunk of population. I think, again, we need to get over this obsession of selling or of providing solutions to all the 190 countries. I think if we can target 40 to 50% of the world population that resides in the regions that the BRICS are located in, we will be doing a human service. Now, what could BRICS do? I think BRICS can do 3 things particularly as this collective with resources, capacities and solutions. The first, I think BRICS can create instruments. I think they have created the New Development Bank, which has given 4 loans, all for renewable projects. BRICS can create instruments such as the bank and some other boutique instruments within the bank that can create both sustainable solutions which include poverty eradication, employment creation, sustainable urbanization, and also focus on big ticket mitigation projects which include renewable energy and other forms of low carbon or no carbon growth. That is one thing BRICS can do. The second what BRICS can do, and this is extremely important, is to focus on the informal sector. All of us, and informal sector is where the aggregation of grievance takes place. If you see where political vehicles get derailed, it is at this particular segment. I think the informal sector needs to be attended to. Big money, big banks, and big instruments have eluded them. They do not cover this particular segment, and I think responding to the informal segment, which in India, by the way, is the majority, is the largest chunk of our population, and South Africa, Brazil, and China also have a fair share, again, close to majority impacts, must be a priority area. Working with the informal sector, giving them know-how, giving them capacity, giving them ability to absorb and inculcate best practices. I think that should be the second, and this could be in forms of many programs. I'm not going into details. We can go to various sectors if someone wants to ask. So that is the second thing BRICS can do. The third BRICS must do is to create a new world narrative. Even now, we are responding to solutions and conversations that emanate from the Atlantic system. Many a times, they have no context to our realities. And I think what BRICS can do is to create a knowledge bank. A knowledge bank of 5 large countries located in 5 diverse regions and rich with their own sets of solutions. some of which have worked, some which have failed. I think if we can create a knowledge bank of our successes and failures, and if we can share it with the regions we reside in, with the larger populations who want to work with us, we can create a new template for knowledge creation. And I think knowledge creation is a must if global governance or climate governance needs to work. So that's the third thing BRICS can do. But more important than what BRICS can do, I think the bilateral conversations within BRICS is equally important. I think BRICS is a good platform, and we again don't have to necessarily have all five agree to do the same thing. I think BRICS has shown that we are a modern day friends with benefits relationship, and we don't hold any grudges because some of us may or may not agree with us. Some of us may want each other's territory. We don't let that get in the way of a good time in Goa. Maharajh was singing in the BRICS academic forum a few months ago. So we don't allow some of the smaller disputes around territory and wealth to come in the way of working together. So I think the bilaterals. So for example, if India and China through the AIIB and through the BRICS Bank can find a via media to invest in each other, to invest in sustainable infrastructure, to invest in sustainable energy, it can be a game changer. We are talking about 3 billion people. We are literally talking about 3.5 billion people of South and East Asia. And if these two can, using the BRICS forum, create closer collaboration, it's a game changer. If Brazil, India, and South Africa can work together in Africa, it's again a huge new play, which again is a counter narrative to both the Chinese projects there as well as the European and American presence there. So even within the BRICS, the bilateral arrangements would be equally important. And I think I've used my time, so I'll shut up and I'll leave it there.
Excellent.
Thanks very much, Samir. I will just pass directly to the audience to see if there are any comments or questions for you. So, anyone? No?
No.
Just a
Did they
second.
even understand what I said?
Yeah, I think so. There is one question here. Just a second.
Thank you for your comments or your views. I'm just a little bit concerned with your proposal of a knowledge bank. I would really appreciate if you could share more details of what exactly are you envisioning and why countries like ours should do it. And lastly, you mentioned that perhaps South Africa, Brazil, and India, they could work together in Africa to kind of counterbalance the Chinese investments as well as others, like the Europeans. And my personal view on this matter, coming from Brazil, is that we had a very strong agenda in the 2000s going to Africa with our own national companies or nationally controlled, nationally owned enterprises like Odebrecht and others, which now we know that they are hugely implicated in very corrupt schemes and so on. So why or how could countries like ours go ahead with such kind of projects, taking into consideration this new moment, especially when companies like those that were ahead of these movements are now out of the game? Thank you.
Just a second.
Hi Samir, Paulo Esteves. Thank you very, very much for staying with us. I have two questions. The first one is related to the bank. You mentioned the bank as a kind of a instrument to further the sustainable agenda for the BRICS. But actually, what we see from the bank is a little bit raises a little bit of concern. We saw that the bank approved 5 projects in our countries in April, way before the bank released its own social environmental policies and safeguards. The very process of analyzing these projects was not disclosed either. So I know that these projects were assessed in terms of their impacts, but they were assessed in a very, let's say, non-transparent way. So we don't know exactly what's going on with these projects. Even in Brazil, the information we have is that the project is intended to fund wind power I think in the northeast of the country. But at the same time, there is information that this project is actually to build up the grid lines to connect these already existing wind plants to the main grid in the country. So we don't know exactly what's going on. You always can say that this is a problem of the national systems, but if it is a problem of our own national systems, I'm concerned about what would happen when this bank starts to lend money to other countries with weaker national systems. So this would be my first question. I regret very much that you use your definition of the BRICS as friends with benefits. I would use that. I will steal that from you in my presentation. But my second question is related to the status of the BRICS nowadays. How do you see, in a nutshell, the summit in India, and what's the impact of this summit for the future of the BRICS? Thank you.
I just have a very quick question as well, more on the internal climate regime discussion. You mentioned about the problem with the 100 billion. Well, with Trump's announcements, regardless if they're going to be true or not, there was a lot of concern on the contribution of the US to the whole functioning of the system, the future of it, and GCF, and so there, it's likely to have a very sharp dispute for the resources that, even if they're not 100 billion, but the resources that are already there. And we feel a bit of a tension within the G77, of course, on this, on whether there is a tendency of, especially other flows, bilateral flows, moving directly to China and India instead of other least developed countries, because that's where most of the emissions are. So the whole narrative of urgency, it's actually diverting all these resources there. It's a complicated, there is no right or wrong on this, but it's just how do you see BRICS, or BASIC in this case, positioning itself regarding this money dispute in the future, the short future? Thanks. It's on you now.
Okay, so I think there are 4 questions. Let me try and respond to them. Let me start with the status of BRICS. We can get that out of the way, and then I'll respond to the climate questions. The way I saw the summit sitting in Delhi, and the way I actually reported on the summit in a few pieces thereafter, was that given the current situation in some of the BRICS countries, BRICS members, given the lack of appetite of most countries around the world to invest heavily in collective action due to their own internal situations, I think it was a remarkably strong outcome statement, which did not announce big populist or big ticket projects and ambitions, but which had within it very deep institutionalization agenda. Let me speak about 5 of them, which will try and give you the flavor of what that summit really was. Without too much fanfare, 3 working groups have been set up under the national security advisors of each country. One we were all familiar with, which was on counterterrorism. But the other 2 are on cyber and on energy. And these are extremely important groups. They have economic implications, growth implications, and climate and sustainability implications as we discuss energy and energy security. We have also set up 2 working groups, and I will be going to the meeting of the first one, of one of them on December 7th, in fact on both of them, which is one, to work towards a framework for implementing and instituting a BRICS credit rating agency. And the first meeting is on December 7th. this is extremely important. Like I said, this is a political institution which will influence the way we price money, where money flows, who it flows to, and what kind of projects are appraised and rated and are beneficiaries of capital, global capital, regional capital. The second is the Economic Analysis Center, the knowledge bank that I was talking about, which is again something that we agreed to in New Delhi, that for the primary purpose of the shortcomings, for example, it is non-transparent the way we have appraised the 5 projects. Moreover, the process and the information around those projects is scarce and it's not shared and it's not available. If we had an analytical center that was working with the bank, with our other institutions, many of these reports would have been published. Many of the processes that were undertaken would have been reported. And because they have to be reported and because they are analyzed by an analytical center, the process itself would have been far more transparent, far more in-depth, and far more wholesome. So that these are 2 other institutions that are coming up. But most importantly, I think what I really found reassuring in the BRICS agenda was that when the European Union and the Americans who underwrote the global trading system are backing away from global trade, BRICS seem to be the vanguard, or it seemed to be, in a sense, holding the flag for global trade, for the efficacy and for the primacy of WTO. I'm not saying it's going to happen. I'm just saying what was reassuring for me was the fact that these 5 countries still see the merits in a global trading regime, still see merit of multilateralism, and still want to infuse energy and capital in institutions that are global in nature. But this is in sharp relief to the whole agenda of mega regional trading arrangements that was being proposed by the previous US administration and also the Europeans. So this is as far as my takeaway of the BRICS summit goes. Of course, the media only reported the India-China conversations around terror, but believe you me, those were side events. Those were not the main events. The main events were much longer, much deeper, and much wider in scope and in conversations. So blame the media, not the summit. I'm doing what Donald Trump does there, just blame the media. Okay, so that was on the status of the BRICS. On the question of the knowledge bank and why it is important and what it can constitute, I think there are remarkable transformation stories in each of our 5 countries, which are both successful and which have gone horribly wrong. And I think that for the benefit of humanity, those must be documented. For example, in Brazil, there was the Bolsa Familia, which sought to include people in a certain manner. I am not saying good, bad, ugly, successful, or failure. I am just saying that the process by which it was implemented, the political thought process died, the implementation plans, citizen participation, outcome measurement, and transformation impact, these, if they are part of our BRICS Knowledge Bank, will not only help the BRICS, but will help others as well. And guess what? All of it is available, but most of them is available coming from Western scholarship, not from scholarship from within these countries. So it is an outsider viewing this and reporting on it rather than an insider telling an inside-out narrative. And I think that inside-out narrative is extremely important to create. Similarly, what India has done with its digital identification, what India is doing with its one bank, one family, one bank account policy, what it is doing using the mobile phone for creating some financial processes. Again, I'm not saying successful or failure, good or bad. I'm saying these are all policy processes that need to be documented and shared. And I can go on and on. So a knowledge bank is essentially a bank where critical social sciences research, economic research, and scientific research can be documented by BRICS scholars and not by Western scholars who visit us for 6 months and then somehow know more about my country than I do. So I think that needs to be reversed. A knowledge bank does that. It shapes the balance of narrative in the right direction. On economic diplomacy in Africa and national agendas, I agree with you. I was just... I wrote a paper recently on India shedding its great romance with South-South partnership and now reimagining its role as a debt global development provider. and that was based on a simple statistic that in this current budget of the Indian government, we have allocated close to $2.5 billion for international support, international economic support to various countries in our neighborhood and some in Africa and some other parts of the world. We have now recently added to that and promised $1 billion to Afghanistan over the next 5 years in the recent conference of Afghanistan. So India is already now on the 1/4 the level of economic deployments when compared to countries like Germany and UK.
Too good to be true.
Yeah.
No, it worked very well. Yeah.
At least.
This one, no?
Yeah.
Very good connection.
Until now.
Yeah.
Acho que ele tá offline, não?
It's not connected.
Oh, he's not connected.
Yeah. Não foi.
Bia, manda uma mensagem.
Caiu.
Caiu lá. Pois é, the last try.
Faltavam 3 ainda. Faltavam 3 ainda.
Não.
Bia, você manda mensagem?
Bom, uma pena ser interrompido assim no meio do raciocínio, mas bom, a gente vai tentar ver se ele consegue reconectar e a gente volta aqui, mas para não atrasar muito, vamos dar sequência aqui à nossa conversa. Bom, eu vou passar então a palavra para o Rasigan, que trazer um pouco a perspectiva da África do Sul sobre esse tema. Rasigan is currently Nodal Head of the Department of Science and Technology and National Research Foundation Center of Excellence in Scientometrics and Science, Technology and Innovation Policy. Very long.
No?
The founding chief director of the Institute for Economic Research on Innovation at Tshwane University of Technology, professor extraordinary at the Center for Research on Evaluation, Science and Technology of Stellenbosch University, an associate research fellow of the TELUS Institute in Boston, and the chairperson of the Southern Africa node of the Millennium Projects.
Thank you very much. I think a big reason for having such big names attached to my title or the introduction is it reduces the amount of time I actually have to speak. So thanks very much to the organizers, Paulo and the colleagues. It's really a pleasure to be here, and I also want to maybe note that the presentation I will make is going to be structured in the following fashion. But it does build on what Anna, Louise, Stephen, Larissa, Anna, again, Barbara, Camila, Natalie, Gonzalo, and Maureen have already raised, including what Samir. This is not a consequence of some global conspiracy, but it gives you a sense that in many of these issues, increasingly, there are new ways in which we can approach some of the old problems. And much of what I'm going to be sharing with you, as you'll see from that structure, is really helping us maybe reconsider and reshape the narrative about where we are today. Yeah? Because what I'm going to be arguing is for the BRICS to actually have a progressive agenda for the future. It needs to be acutely aware of the current, not have a romanticized view of the present. And that's something we should all be very concerned about. So, moving ahead. And it's an important reminder because of a paper delivered just as we met in Durban for the BRICS summit by our good friend of world systems theory, Emmanuel Wallerstein, who actually argued at that point, he raised the question, is the BRICS an avant-garde of anti-imperialism? Or are the BRICS merely sub-imperialist agents of the global north? Yeah. Interestingly, he said there are those that argue it is both. Yeah. And what I'm going to be sharing with you is that latter view, that it is indeed both. Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with that. That just describes our real situation. And it's something we need to come to terms with. Yeah. And increasingly, at least for me, the proposal is when we consider the BRICS and we reconsider the BRICS in its role in global governance, that as Samir had done, and I'm sure the colleagues around the room will also maybe be encouraged to see, the BRICS is more than 5 flags, and it must be seen in that way. It's 3.1 billion people. Remember what Barbara had mentioned. That's many zeros, yeah? But that's many real people. And it's very important that these flags speak with the voice of those people. So, when we look at how where we are today, it's important to at least appreciate how we've gotten here, the route that we've taken. So, notwithstanding the fact that our histories are very different, we have reached a point in our history where the combined faith of all of the different strands by which we've been inserted into a global system, a world system, yeah, it coincides and has generated particular crises. And these crises coexist. They feed off each other. And because of that, the climate crisis in and of itself cannot be isolated. Whilst it can't be isolated, it also operates at a level much deeper than the social aspects, much deeper than the political aspects, and much deeper than the economic aspects. Why? Because the ecology gives us the space to live. All the others is products of our imagination. And I'm going to advance a little because, I mean, in terms of what people have presented, it's important for us to rethink this narrative. Yeah? So along this route, and it's good that the colleague, she's not here at the moment, but did mention the word Anthropocene, because this gives us maybe a much better clinical way of describing our contemporary times. Yeah? It is a conflation of many things that we ourselves, we as a species, have created. And because we've created it, we must also be encouraged to take responsibility for it. So there's a lot of detail there, and we're published elsewhere. And you'll see a reference list where people can engage more deeply. I also want to encourage the colleagues to be appraised that the socio-economic trends that we see around us, yeah, have a direct correlation with biophysical impacts. And so I hope this isn't conforming to pointing at statistics to exclude people. I'm using these statistics to include all of us. Why? Because those biophysical processes cannot be detached from the socio-economic circumstances that we live. Yeah. So all of the negative features in our environment are a result of our own behaviors and our lifestyles. And we aggregate it within the 5 flags. Yes. So when we have negative features, it is because of ourselves. Very important to bear in mind. Yeah. And our negative condition affords those that profit from this and I make that emphasis, profit from this, to actually increase their detachment from the broad populations in the 5 countries. So I'll proceed down this line essentially. We of course know also, and it's very important to bear in mind, that we do not live on an infinite resource. This planet itself has certain biophysical features which we cannot remedy if we go beyond a particular boundary. And it's only now that we are grasping the enormity of the consequences of our actions. Yeah. Very much like WikiLeaks and others have pointed out, and people should bear in mind, these are important things. We've maybe chatted with Alisa about it. Yeah. It's not just that the tobacco industry knew that smoking was bad. I'm a victim of that directly. In the 70s. If they had actually made this known, maybe it would have prevented me, a child from the 60s, developing such a bad habit. Yeah? But Royal Dutch Shell and other energy corporations and companies already had modeled the impacts of climate change in the early 70s. Why then did we have to wait for the Rio Summit and the Millennium Assessment for this to become a challenge for us? There is culpability in that. And when we speak about justice, it's something we need to keep in mind. Yeah. Because of these trends and what surrounds us, yeah, major issues are confronting us. But in terms of our responses to these challenges, and this is the question about what are the types of infrastructures, especially institutions like the BRICS or the New Development Bank, are they going to build infrastructures that perpetuate the very problems that we now seek to escape? Or are they going to afford us the capacities and capabilities to transcend these problems? It's critically important that we keep a sense of relevance in the work that we are doing, and that the science about what's taking place is not seen as something outside of us. Like Samir Egli said, for a lot of our history, all of ourselves in the global south have been the writers of case studies. The theorizers have come from the global north, putting together our case studies. We need to take responsibility for these knowledge systems ourselves and work much more thoroughly in it. These are just 4 of the aspects identified as being of critical importance, and all of them speak to infrastructures and what it is that we deploy. So, I mean, we have to continuously question and challenge the notion of how common are we? What is it that we share in common? We've said this from 1987, people have said it in 1992 in this city itself, in South Africa, when the 10th anniversary was celebrated, it was reiterated again at Rio Plus 20, common but differentiated. How do we pay particular attention to that differentiation? What is it that we mean by differentiation in our contemporary times itself? Yeah. So, let's now segue into something which is quite critical in terms of the world that we occupy at the moment. Yeah. So that gives you a sense of the scale of the world economy. And if you look at the scale of the world economy, remember, all of the BRICS combined is still less than 1 country in the world. That's our economic output. Yeah. All 5 countries, huge populations, still contribute only 22.74% of global output in 2015. The USA on its own represents 23.32%. It's very important about this interstate inequality that exists. It is a combined but uneven world. Very important for us to remember. And that the crises that take place inside this are a consequence of these world systems. These are not alien crises. These are crises of our making. Yeah? And so I'd list some of them, and again, more detail is available. Climate, energy, environment, finance, food, inequality, poverty, and underdevelopment. They all speak to each other and actually build upon each other. You cannot extract one aspect and hope by fixing it we will globally resolve the challenges we face, because this has just been distributed through globalization. Consequence of this type of distribution within neoliberalism, as people have argued, is we end up with hollow states. And hollow states, when attacked by the virus of corruption, and we are all being confronted by this, but maybe particularly acutely within the BRICS, because we are the BRICS, and we feel it most directly. What is the consequence? Weak policies, incoherent agencies, including maybe some of the agencies we are creating at the moment. And because of that, a reduced possible impact. For us, this is a people's dystopia. This is a nightmare. What is the alternative? And this is monopolies, oligopolies, cartels, and the corruption proliferating, and that's the neoliberal dream, the world where the state is removed. So we need to be careful about this. And I want to just concentrate on the inequality aspect. Not all of the crises, but be encouraged to see these are tightly correlated. So based on work from Credit Suisse, a very distinguished member of the financial sector, this is not written by a left-wing perspective itself, and it's now quoted by the United Nations. You would see in the percentile shares, half of the world's population, the poorest half of the world's population, has, between 2010 and 2015, seen their share of global income decrease. That's out here. Whereas the increases have been amongst the richest people in the world. So keep that picture in mind. And here, I had to put this up because people kept speaking about elephants. And that's the elephant graph that comes from Branko Milanovic. And you will see in this that the huge drop, this declined middle class, which also speaks to the Trump issue, is also a consequence of the rising elite within our societies. And that rising elite joining a global elite. So if we look at where they distributed, well, there you have it. Percentage-wise, as contributions to population or GDP, the numbers of people, and this is in purchasing power parity, as Louise had mentioned, we can compare this data between countries. Look at this. South Africa is only producing 0.46% of the world's output, but houses 1.1% of the global elite. That's more than 3 times the amount we produce. It shows the levels of inequality being concentrated also in our societies. And so I want to raise then a possibility, and I would really encourage amongst the BRICS a wider, because people have mentioned this variously, it's not just Uber as a phenomenon. But I'm suggesting to you that the successor to capitalism is emerging. And it's emerging from a capitalism that's incapable of reproducing itself. And there's a whole variety of forms in which this is already amongst us. But we have yet to embrace it. And my real concern then is normatively, if you have a look at this, and I mean, Barbara and others have mentioned this even change in language. Now we have high-level champions. And high-level champions that are seeking to norm us into the system that is failing. We need to be extremely concerned whether we take on this role of shepherding 3.1 billion people into a failed and failing system itself. So, by way of conclusion, see? I really want to emphasize the point, and I would really encourage all of the colleagues involved in research about the BRICS. Are the BRICS representing only the voices of a national elite which increasingly has the characteristic of a transnational comprador class? In other words, its actions is not the interest of the territories that we occupy. Why? Because what we've also learned, this system change that's required, that's demanded by the crisis, it's inhibited by the institutional resilience. And we ourselves give credit to those institutional forms by rebuilding them continuously. At some point, we have to realize the reform is not creating instruments that are appropriate and relevant to our situation. We need to cast and go beyond reform itself. So transformation becomes critical. What does transformation mean, if not embracing post-capitalism? It is a challenge for us. Can we think beyond that? And for us to effect this, and this then comes to the bottom line, what is it that the BRICS can actually do? Yeah? We can be involved in popular remobilizations, not the old, other generational forms of mobilization. We need to remobilize through building trust again with people. Why? Because it's only through people's power, through people being afforded power, that we can hope to be the change we want to see in the world. Yeah? And I would argue, even if this drops, the BRICS could possibly be the midwife, and there's maybe a use of a woman's term, yeah, could possibly be the midwife to post-capitalism and a global citizenship in a planetary civilization. Yeah? We have this possibility in front of us if we are willing to embrace it. And lots of references. Obrigado.
Very good. No. O Samir.
Quer voltar?
É, tá aí online. Bia. Tá.
Ok. Se você sabe mexer no Word, eu não sei mexer no Word. No Word não, no Windows.
A gente conseguiu restabelecer a conexão lá com a Índia, dar um tempinho para o Samir voltar, concluir as colocações dele.
Tá,
E depois a gente passa para o Paulo.
I should send someone my presentation. To leave a message.
Não. Eu tenho.
Yep.
Tá. Ele tá aí?
Não? Ele tá...
Tenta mais uma vez.
Ele não atendeu, né? Ele não atendeu.
Yeah, remember, it's institutional. So
Yep.
it means ORF is
I give up. Unfortunately, it didn't work. But we tried. Well, Rasigan, thanks very much. Such an interesting, thoughtful presentation. I'm going to pass directly to Paulo, and then we go back to the discussion, hopefully. Paulo, well, do I need to introduce
No.
Paulo?
Don't do that.
Então, vou passar direto para ele.
Bom, bom dia a todos, a todas. Bom, preparei essa apresentação com 4 passos. Eu não sou um especialista em governança climática e muito menos ambiental. Eu vou trabalhar com, na verdade, BRICS e multilateralismo, esse é o tema da apresentação. Essa apresentação está organizada em torno de 4 passos. O primeiro passo, as narrativas em torno dos BRICS. O segundo passo, uma tentativa de definição do grupo, de abordagem em relação ao grupo. o terceiro passo, que eu tenho chamado de efeito BRICS, e o quarto e final passo, a tentativa de elaborar isso em torno do problema da governança climática. Uma tentativa de construção de uma perspectiva nativa sobre os BRICS, ela certamente não enfatizaria a criação do acrônimo pelo Goldman Sachs, mas teria uma ênfase política na conformação do grupo a partir de 2006, uma série de reuniões que tem lugar, em geral, ao lado da Assembleia Geral da ONU, ao largo da Assembleia Geral da ONU, entre os ministros das relações exteriores dos 4 países, dos então 4 países. Nesse sentido, a minha consideração sobre os BRICS é de que o grupo, como tal, ele não emerge como um conjunto de mercados. Ao contrário, o grupo tem poder no seu DNA. É um grupo criado para intervir sobre a ordem internacional e que busca, enfim, ganhos no interior dessa ordem. É uma iniciativa que teve lugar, como eu mencionei antes, ela começa em 2006, mas ela vai se materializar apenas em 2009, logo em seguida da intervenção russa na Geórgia. Não por acaso, o primeiro summit dos BRICS, isso é uma coisa que em geral as pessoas esquecem, o primeiro summit dos BRICS acontece exatamente na Rússia. Brasil e Rússia são, por razões absolutamente distintas, são pivôs da construção do grupo, e esse grupo começa com uma agenda muito minimalista. Além da demonstração da reunião desses quatro países em Ekaterimburgo, há também a construção de uma agenda que busca coordenar as posições. Naquele primeiro momento é uma agenda fundamentalmente de coordenação das posições do grupo em relação a uma questão fundamental, que é a reforma, que já foi discutido ontem, que é a reforma das instituições financeiras internacionais. No entanto, essa agenda, que é uma agenda que começa apenas com coordenação, ela vai se tornando cada vez mais densa, cada vez mais consistente, e vai começando principalmente a partir da cúpula de 2011 em Sanya, quando então a África do Sul ingressa no grupo, ela se transforma cada vez mais numa plataforma de cooperação, muito em função do fato de que há uma resistência, de que a proposta de reforma das instituições financeiras internacionais encontra grande resistência no ambiente internacional, particularmente em relação aos Estados Unidos. O grupo então passa a ter uma dupla dinâmica. A primeira dessas dinâmicas é a estrutura de um clube, como o Andrew enfatizou ontem, um clube para o qual as regras, clube em política internacional é uma estrutura interessante porque as regras valem apenas para os seus membros, e ele é naturalmente excludente. Então ele não tem a pretensão de incorporar todo mundo, as regras valem apenas para os seus membros, os arranjos cooperativos valem apenas para os seus membros, e a coordenação apresenta o grupo como um grupo razoavelmente consistente no interior dos fóruns internacionais. Mas ele passa também a ter uma dinâmica bilateral, que é uma dinâmica que é marcada pela relação da China com os demais parceiros. Se nós formos tomar os indicadores de comércio, por exemplo, nós vamos ver que a China é o segundo parceiro comercial de cada um dos BRICS. Mas nenhum outro BRICS é parceiro comercial de nenhum outro BRICS, parceiro comercial relevante de nenhum outro BRICS. Se a gente tomar a África do Sul, por exemplo, o Brasil não vai figurar entre os 5 principais parceiros comerciais da África do Sul, e vice-versa. O mesmo com a Rússia, o mesmo com a Índia, ou seja, há uma estrutura que é quase uma roda de bicicleta. No centro a gente tem a China, e a China mantém uma relação bastante, enfim, mantém uma posição de bastante relevância em relação a todos os outros parceiros. A despeito do peso dos BRICS e da responsabilidade que esses estados carregam consigo em relação às populações que supostamente representam, a imagem do Friends with Benefits, para mim, ela é uma imagem interessante, porque ela me permite trabalhar com essa ideia de caleidoscópio. Cada um desses estados tem muito pouco, é um grupo muito heterogêneo, cada um desses estados tem muito pouco em comum com os demais estados, mas a despeito disso, o grupo é um grupo que beneficia a todos os estados, ou se você quiser, a todas as elites que conduzem a política externa desses estados. Então, as razões pelas quais os estados eu posso pensar numa espécie de caleidoscópio que me explicaria as razões pelas quais esses estados resolvem se unir ou ingressar no grupo BRICS. Cada vez que a gente mexe no caleidoscópio, uma imagem diferente do próprio Estado e do próprio sistema, e do sistema internacional vai emergir. Então, se a gente fizer um exercício de brincadeira, no caso da Rússia, o grupo é importante porque ele afirma uma ordem multipolar. Ele afirma uma ordem que não é mais rule-based, mas é uma ordem power-based, é uma ordem organizada em torno da gramática do poder e não em torno de uma gramática normativa, e traz de volta um jogo geopolítico que para a Rússia é, de fato, interessante. No caso da China, o grupo BRICS é um grupo interessante, é um grupo curioso, porque o grupo permite que a China diminua o seu footprint, permite que a China se esconda atrás do próprio grupo para diminuir as suas pegadas internacionais, para diminuir a sua presença internacional, e onde se lê China, passa a se ler BRICS, ou passa a se ler o Banco Asiático de Infraestrutura, ou passa a se ler FOCAC, ou China-CELAC, ou seja, um conjunto de arranjos que de alguma maneira, um conjunto de arranjos atrás dos quais a China de alguma maneira se esconde e que permite dessa maneira diminuir a sua presença internacional. Mas é também um instrumento de descentralização, como todos os demais instrumentos que eu mencionei. Se nós formos ver, curiosamente, na semana passada eu perguntei para um dos diretores da UNCTAD se já havia uma contabilização do quanto de comércio hoje já é feito em outras moedas que não o dólar americano, e o quanto de comércio já é feito, já é realizado em, por exemplo, yuans. E eles não existe esse dado. Mas cada um dos acordos de comércio que a China celebra, ela celebra em moeda local. E esse processo é um processo que vem crescendo e que nós não temos ainda a capacidade de avaliar quais são os seus efeitos, porque é um processo de, vamos dizer, é um processo em que devagar a China vai minando o dólar como moeda internacional. Isso é um processo que pode levar 10 anos, é um processo que pode levar 15 anos, mas ele é um processo que eventualmente pode levar menos tempo que isso. A partir de Durban, e Durban é um turning point para os BRICS, a partir de Durban nós vamos ter um fenômeno que é a transformação dos BRICS para a China num instrumento de relacionamento interregional. Curiosamente, em Durban, pela primeira vez nas reuniões dos BRICS, os chefes de Estado da região se reuniram com a liderança dos BRICS, ou, se vocês quiserem, com a liderança chinesa, para discutir investimentos na região. Essa reunião foi bastante criticada pela chancelaria brasileira na época. Curiosamente, no ano seguinte, na reunião de Fortaleza, todos os líderes sul-americanos passam a se reúnem depois da cúpula com a liderança chinesa em Brasília. Da mesma maneira, na reunião no Summit de Ufa, os líderes, os chefes de Estado da Organização para a Cooperação de Xangai também vão se reunir com a liderança chinesa. Na reunião de Delhi, também há reunião de chefes de Estado do Sudeste Asiático com a liderança chinesa, de modo que o BRICS se tornou uma espécie, cada um dos BRICS, que não a China, se tornou uma espécie de gateway para a própria China se relacionar com as demais regiões. Do ponto de vista da África do Sul e do Brasil, é o exato oposto da China. Há uma aposta na multipolaridade, há uma leitura que eu creio que é, no mínimo, complicada, mas eventualmente mais do que complicada, de que a multipolaridade levaria a uma democratização do sistema internacional. Eu acho que isso pode ser bastante disputado. Mas, em todo caso, há uma leitura tanto da África do Sul quanto do Brasil de que a multipolaridade é um ambiente mais propício para a realização dos seus interesses, Os BRICS são uma ferramenta não apenas para a consolidação da liderança regional, mas também para apontam para um caminho para que sejam reconhecidos como lideranças globais, e são também uma ferramenta para impulsionar o desenvolvimento doméstico, além do que para os regimes do Brasil, para os regimes políticos do Brasil e da África do Sul, o BRICS é também um grupo que legitima as ações desse regime. Do ponto de vista da Índia, a Índia é certamente o caso mais complicado no interior dos BRICS. Do ponto de vista da Índia, há uma aposta sim na multipolaridade, mas os BRICS também têm uma função, uma função de estabilização das relações regionais na Índia, principalmente com a China. Eu vou voar. Isso aqui eu já posso passar. Basicamente, o que me interessava aqui era apontar que na África do Sul há um turning point, há uma mudança na agenda dos BRICS, e eu tenho uma certa discordância com o Samir, é covardia isso que eu estou fazendo, mas enfim. Eu tenho uma certa discordância com o Samir pelo fato de que me parece que na Índia nós chegamos num impasse em termos do avanço da agenda dos BRICS. No summit da Rússia já havia ficado claro que duas agendas estavam se consolidando no interior dos BRICS, que era a agenda da Rússia em torno do retorno da geopolítica, e a agenda da China, que na Rússia é lançado, no UFA é lançado um instrumento chamado BRICS Economic Partnership, a agenda da China que aponta para a transformação dos BRICS numa área de livre comércio. Obviamente com resistência de todos os demais atores, mas de qualquer maneira isto já está na agenda. Na Índia, esse é um ponto que o Samir mencionou, na Índia nós voltamos a discutir comércio, e há muito claramente a perspectiva de que no próximo ano nós teremos um mecanismo de facilitação de comércio aprovado entre os BRICS. Mas me parece que na Índia a agenda dos BRICS em torno da coordenação ela encontrou paralisia. O que pode ser disputado é o peso que o incidente ou que o debate em torno da questão do Paquistão entre Índia e China, qual foi o impacto dessa questão na dinâmica ou na agenda dos BRICS. Muito rapidamente, 3 interpretações sobre a emergência dos BRICS: a interpretação liberal, mais clássica do Eikenberry, de que os BRICS os BRICS e particularmente a China deveriam se adaptar a uma ordem liberal existente. A segunda interpretação do Kupchan, de que nós teríamos um mundo pós-hegemônico, bastante marcado pela fragmentação, e a interpretação do Acharya, que apostaria na construção de vários, o que eles chamam de a ordem global se transformaria numa espécie de cinema multiplex. Cada sala que você vai, você assiste a um filme diferente, que tem uma lógica diferente, tem, enfim, te conta uma história diferente. É uma imagem bem pós-verdade, né? Bem adequada para a ideia de pós-verdade. Mas, enfim, a minha abordagem se aproxima um pouco dessa abordagem do Acharya, nesse caso, apontando para uma ordem internacional que já não é mais construída em torno da ideia de hegemonia ou da Pax americana, ou da ideia de hegemonia de um Estado. Se nós podemos pensar que essa ordem ainda é construída em torno da ideia de hegemonia do mercado, mas ela não tem uma liderança, é impossível nesse momento apontar um centro a partir do qual, um centro capaz de liderar essa dinâmica da ordem internacional. E essa ordem é construída a partir do que eu estou chamando, que eu acho que a gente pode chamar de efeito BRICS. O efeito BRICS é uma área de encontro de 3 processos. Vamos lembrar que esse processo é um processo que se inicia nos anos 2000. O primeiro elemento desse processo, o primeiro fenômeno, seria a incapacidade ou a falta de vontade política dos Estados Unidos de liderar a reforma liberal das instituições, ou neoliberal das instituições internacionais. A crise financeira, principalmente no campo da segurança, no caso de 2001, a crise financeira de 2008 e 2009, e a criação do grupo BRICS como uma alternativa de poder para o sistema internacional. O efeito desses 3 processos é o que eu estou chamando de efeito BRICS, que basicamente significa apontar para uma ordem internacional que não tem mais um centro.
na qual a gente tem a emergência de novos polos de poder, mas, ao mesmo tempo, o desafio dos valores que, de alguma maneira, estruturam as instituições multilaterais. Nesse mundo pós-hegemônico e descentralizado, a multipolaridade e a competição entre propósitos sociais ou valores distintos. Propósitos sociais é uma expressão eu estou recorrendo a uma expressão do John Huggie, é a marca, nós temos uma competição entre propósitos sociais, é a marca dessa ordem internacional. Estou me apressando. Esse efeito BRICS tem o efeito BRICS tem 4 consequências. Em primeiro lugar, a paralisia das instituições multilaterais desde 2000 eu não estou dizendo que os BRICS tenham causado isso, tá? A ideia de efeito BRICS aqui é muito mais marketagem da minha parte do que propriamente uma relação de causalidade. Os BRICS não causaram a paralisia das instituições multilaterais, mas a emergência de novos polos de poder, essa sim paralisa, e a concorrência entre propósitos sociais distintos, esses sim paralisam as instituições multilaterais. O segundo fenômeno que nós podemos ver em várias arenas é a ideia de race to the bottom. Nós temos uma erosão das normas internacionais eu acho bastante acentuada, e a proliferação de mecanismos bilaterais, unilaterais ou plurilaterais, como o TPP, com o defunto TPP, a Aliança Transatlântica, defunta Aliança Transatlântica, mas eventualmente outros arranjos regionais, outros arranjos plurilaterais que vão tomar o lugar das instituições, ou vão tomando o lugar das instituições multilaterais. Qual é o problema de arranjos plurilaterais? Nós temos 2 formas de ver o multilateralismo. Nós podemos ver o multilateralismo do ponto de vista quantitativo, todas as vezes que 3 ou mais estados se reúnem, nós temos uma coisa multilateral, ou nós podemos ver o multilateralismo de uma maneira qualitativa. A forma qualitativa que foi tratada, por exemplo, pelo Huggie, ela vai apontar para o fato para a possibilidade analítica de que as instituições multilaterais seriam caracterizadas por 2 dimensões: a indivisibilidade e a reciprocidade difusa. Se nós tomarmos só a questão da reciprocidade difusa, nós vamos ver que arranjos plurilaterais, ao contrário das instituições multilaterais, eles valem apenas para os seus membros. E a reciprocidade entre esses membros é uma reciprocidade específica. Recíproco, isso não existe. Eu ajo conforme o outro age, e não baseado num princípio que se quer universal. Essa é a característica fundamental dos arranjos plurilaterais. E há uma 4ª dimensão, que é o que ficou conhecido como modelo de Angola. O modelo de Angola foi mencionado ontem, sem que o nome fosse usado, como uma forma de garantir, de oferecer garantias para empréstimos que a China utiliza na África, por exemplo, garantias em espécie, em produtos. Mas o importante do modelo de Angola não é isso, não é o fato de que os estados estão oferecendo petróleo como garantia. O importante do modelo de Angola é que ele é oferecido por uma determinada potência emergente para um estado, no momento de crise, como forma de permitir que esse estado escape das condicionalidades das instituições multilaterais. Então, o mais importante do modelo de Angola não é o petróleo que foi oferecido. O mais importante é que esse modelo, esse empréstimo foi oferecido como alternativa ao ajuste estrutural que o FMI impunha, então, a Angola em 2002. Esse é um fenômeno que nós podemos ver se reproduzir. Ele, digamos, na crise da Grécia, ele chegou a aparecer. A sua possibilidade chegou a aparecer. A China até produziu um empréstimo, emprestou um conjunto de recursos para a Grécia, mas acabou não se constituindo nisso que a gente está chamando de modelo de Angola. Nesse caso particular da Grécia, a China apenas se aproveitou e acabou controlando uma determinada instalação de comércio na Grécia. Para os países emergentes, o efeito BRICS significa uma crescente dependência desses países, particularmente em relação à China, crescente competição entre esses países, particularmente na periferia do sistema internacional, e fundamentalmente a operação num cenário de crescente instabilidade. No caso esse é o último passo no caso da governança climática. Isso está errado. Não, está certo. Isso está certo. No caso da governança climática. Curiosamente, desde a primeira resolução, desde o primeiro comunicado dos BRICS, dos chefes de Estado dos BRICS, CIGI aparece como um ponto em comum. Então, em 2009 isso aparece, em 2010 isso aparece, em 2011 CIGI aparece. A afirmação do CIGI é algo que aparentemente reuniria aqueles países, obviamente à exceção da Rússia, mas reuniria pelo menos os outros 4 países. Até que em 2012, curiosamente na Índia, eu chequei esse dado ontem, a gente estava conversando sobre isso ontem, eu chequei o dado, em 2012, na cúpula da Índia, CIGI é trocado por CIGI, não, isso aqui é, sorry, desculpa, is a D instead of B, sorry, is a CIGI-RC, responsabilidades comuns e diferenciadas de acordo com as suas capacidades, ou com as capacidades de cada um dos estados. Esse é um vocabulário que foi usado pelos BRICS nos seus comunicados desde a cúpula de Delhi, e desde então, desde 2012, que todos os comunicados reproduzem a mesma coisa. Sobre mudança climática, basicamente duas sentenças ou 2 artigos são repetidos ad nauseam nas declarações dos BRICS. CIGI-A, depois CIGI-RC, e o uso pacífico da energia nuclear. Esses são os 2 elementos que atravessam todos os comunicados dos BRICS, particularmente em relação à mudança climática. O que significa isso? Meu argumento aqui é que o CIGI-RC, as responsabilidades comuns e diferenciadas de acordo com as capacidades, tem uma grande relação com o tal do bottom-up approach. E aí eu não vou defender a ementa do painel anterior, eu não vou defender o problema proposto no painel anterior, mas eu vou pelo menos tentar fazer sentido do problema. Em 92, quando o CIGI, me corrijam se eu estiver enganado, o CIGI é criado, é estabelecido em 92, certo? Em 92, quando o CIGI é estabelecido, ele dizia respeito, o seu significado é disputado, mas pelo menos para uma parte dos atores, uma parte significativa dos atores que estavam em 92 na Conferência do Rio, CIGI dizia respeito a uma responsabilidade histórica, a um dever histórico dos países desenvolvidos para com o efeito das suas ações em relação ao meio ambiente. Responsabilidade significa aqui pagar. Né? E significa que há uma disjunção entre aqueles que têm essas responsabilidades e aqueles que não têm essas responsabilidades. Essa construção do CIGI em 92, ela diz respeito, sobretudo, a um conjunto de obrigações históricas que se referem ao passado colonial. No momento em que a transformação do CIGI para o CIGI-RC, a lógica da obrigação ela desaparece, da obrigação histórica, ela desaparece, porque a obrigação agora é relacionada às capacidades que cada um dos estados tem naquele presente momento. Ou seja, não se trata mais de fazer justiça com o passado, não se trata mais de um ajuste de contas em relação ao passado, mas se trata agora de um conjunto de responsabilidades que nós temos no momento em que estamos negociando um conjunto de medidas para, por exemplo, tratar do problema da mudança climática. A abordagem bottom-up, me parece, ela tem uma relação clara com o CIGI-RC, no sentido de que ela enfatiza as iniciativas e os processos nacionais. Essas iniciativas e processos nacionais, só para a gente ter claro, elas saem de 44 iniciativas em 2009, se eu não estou enganado, nós estamos falando aqui de legislação para 500 leis e políticas adotadas em 66 países em 2013. Ou seja, há uma proliferação de iniciativas domésticas antes de Paris, que permite, de alguma maneira, asfaltar o caminho para Paris. Porque essas medidas já estão sendo adotadas principalmente nas economias centrais em muitas das economias dos países emergentes, de modo que as capacidades já estão lá, já estão postas. E ela tem uma orientação de mercado porque ela carrega consigo uma determinada estrutura de incentivos. Ontem eu mencionei a legislação sobre carros elétricos na China, mas se nós pensarmos que nós temos 3 grandes mercados, que são China, Estados Unidos e União Europeia, e se esses 3 grandes mercados começam a adotar legislações bastante rígidas com relação a carbono, o que nós vamos ter, o fenômeno que nós vamos assistir é um fenômeno de transformação de toda a periferia do sistema internacional na mesma direção. A abordagem bottom-up, num certo sentido, a abordagem bottom-up, num certo sentido, ela carrega consigo uma orientação de mercado. O problema dessa orientação é que ela vai, de alguma maneira, criar novas hierarquias, criar novas relações de dependência, particularmente no que concerne à questão tecnológica. No caso específico, então, para concluir, do efeito BRICS na governança climática, o que nós podemos ver é que a governança climática, num certo sentido, ela é uma espécie de expressão do próprio sistema internacional nessa época de multipolaridade. Há uma transformação do multilateralismo, digamos, dessa concepção qualitativa do multilateralismo, baseada na ideia de reciprocidade difusa e de indivisibilidade, num multilateralismo de quantidades e de números, no qual a integração pela via do mercado é mais importante do que a aderência a princípios e a responsabilidades que são tomados por universais. Muito obrigado, desculpem tomar tanto tempo.